Oh. That I'm calling you to slay with these dreams I have of you waking up.
Started bringing up the past, how the things you love don't last, even though this isn't fair for both of us.
Ooh, maybe I'm just a fool. I still belong with you, where you are. Ooh, these minefields that I walk through, what I risk to be close to you. Ooh, these minefields keeping me from you. What I risk to be close to you, close to you. Didn't notice what I lost until all the lights were off, and not knowing what you're up to torture me.
Now this might be a mistake, we're broken in so many ways, but I piece us back together slowly.
Maybe I'm just a fool. I still belong with you, where you are. Ooh, these minefields that I walk through. Ooh, I risk to be close to you. Ooh, these minefields keeping me from you. I risk to be close to you, close to you. A mistake that I'm calling you to slave, but these dreams I have of you waiting up.
The person who is online. Huh? Hello. Okay. Please, where is the ICT guy? Can you let us know whether the presenter is able to listen to us? I can see he's online, but I need to know whether
Hello,
he's here.
I can hear you. Is that
Okay.
Professor?
Daktari, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Can you increase your volume slightly, or we do for you?
Can you hear me better?
Can you increase his volume? I want to hear.
Hello?
Now it's good.
Oh, great.
So just a few minutes, like 2 minutes, and we start off. I'll first introduce you, and
Yes.
then I give you, I don't know how long you want. This is a keynote presentation. So how long would you like to take? I think the maximum is 25, 30 in that range, so that we have time to discuss a few things.
That is fine.
You are okay with the maximum 30?
Yes, I'm okay with that. Thanks.
Oh, excellent. So just 1 minute. Please, if you are outside there, I hope the sound is coming out. So come in so that we start off. We have a few presentations after the keynote address in this session.
Check.
So I want to. Good afternoon. It is usually normal, not abnormal, when the afternoon comes after you throw some stones into your stomach, that people tend to doze more So I would like you to have social distance so that when you doze more, I see you. Good. So my name's Professor Ward George. You can see in the program from Egerton University. When you come to Egerton University, you find me at the Center of Excellence, where we have a project there. And also it is supporting sustainable agriculture and agribusiness. So there are many students, about 240 masters and PhD. Some of them are here. I'm just trying to waste 1 minute so that you settle. I want to introduce the speaker. Good. I was waiting for this gentleman. Please, I hope, have you introduced yourself?
Yes, I was already introduced in the morning.
The crowd could be different.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Edwin Otieno. I was not supposed to be the rapporteur, but I'm standing in for Dr. Tom. So pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to do the job of National Assembly Speaker. And a National Assembly Speaker, that is the person who moderates the job, and a keen of that nature. So our keynote speaker this afternoon is Dr. Oluwande. Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. Can you hear that?
Hello.
Okay, I think we are on back. So it's Africa, you know, in Africa, those things happen. Dr. Oluwande is from Tegemeo Institute. Is a research institute for policy in agriculture. He's also a senior researcher there. And Dr. Oluwande is a very long-term researcher in area of agricultural policy. And also at Tegemeo Institute, he's heading a World Bank funded project, which also deals with the household surveys, farm household surveys. And as he speaks to you on the topical area of COVID pandemic and how it has affected the food systems, I would like you to think wide, because when you talk about food systems, we talk about the whole value chain from production to consumption. There are very many issues that have been done in the COVID era period, and you call them lockdowns in short. But for your information, the issues are 8 restrictions that the government always do. And some of them have issues with agriculture and food systems. The other one is actually the Ministry of Agriculture took some initiatives and did a lot of things to try to support the food systems during this time. So we want to welcome Dr. Oluwande. Please, Dr. Oluwande, you have a maximum of the time we agreed. Please go on. Welcome.
Thank you, Professor Ward, and thank you, everybody, and the organizers of this forum or conference for inviting me to give some insights that are and opinions about how COVID-19 pandemic has affected food systems. And I would request that the host can enable me to share my screen. If the host can enable me to share my screen, that would be useful.
Go on. Share.
It is still disabled. I can't share it.
ICT, is it okay now? Try, John.
Oh yes, it is now fine. Thank you.
Can
So,
see. Just make it on presentation mode.
Thank you. I've done that. So my talk today will be on the reality of COVID-19 pandemic on food systems in sub-Saharan Africa. When I was preparing for this, I thought about some of the work that I've done around this topic, but I felt that this is the most relevant because it is more comprehensive. I've done some surveys in Kenya looking at the effect of COVID-19 and associated policy responses on livelihoods, mainly income and food security. But I thought that this would give a wider picture of what is happening, not only in Kenya, but also some other countries in Africa. So this work we conducted as a team with some researchers outside Kenya, but within the continent and even beyond. It was done under the Regional Network of Agricultural Policy Research Institutes, RINAPRI in short, of which Tegemeo Institute of Egerton University is a member. And it was commissioned by the Africa Food Trade Coalition that is led by the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA in short. And the work was funded by USAID and United Kingdom's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office that used to be DFID before. So I want to acknowledge all this and also the co-authors of the paper on which this presentation is based. The website that you see written on the screen there on the slide is where you can download that paper to read it in more detail. So I'll provide the motivation and objectives that motivated the paper, the background to the COVID-19 policy responses on the continent, and the pathways through which COVID-19 pandemic would affect food systems, and the method we took to do that work. And then I'll describe the literature and then highlight some of the impacts of COVID pandemic on food systems, focusing on domestic food value chain, regional and international food trade, and food and nutrition security as we organized the teams. So the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the continent food systems. Yes?
We are seeing your slides are a little bit faint. Is there something you can do from your side? Are you seeing them?
Yes, I'm seeing them very clearly. I think it is because of, it must be on your side because on my side they are okay.
Okay, just proceed.
Okay, thank you. So as I was saying, COVID-19 pandemic has affected food systems on the continent through various ways or avenues, and most importantly, through the impact of policy responses that were put in place and still continue to be implemented in response to the virus. So there have been a lot of studies in this area, and there was a need to synthesize the information so that we can be able to understand what is known and identify the areas that would need further inquiry. So we synthesized the evidence that we found in the literature on the impact of COVID-19 on the food systems. And we also looked at the evidence with respect to gendered impacts of those policies and the pandemic on the food system actors. And we tried to identify what has been effective among the various measures put in place to address the impacts of the pandemic and identify gaps in terms of what is known and what is unknown. And then we provided some policy and research recommendations. So we've found out that most of the restrictive policies to contain the spread of the virus revolve around restricting internal movement of people, lockdowns, curfews, and stay-at-home requirements, like the advisory that was in Kenya, that those who are above a certain age group are encouraged to work from home. There was also closing of public transport in various countries. So the countries that are shaded in dark green are the ones that had those categories of policy responses. And the ones that are light green did not have them, while the ones that are not shaded, we didn't get information on them. So you can see that many countries instituted or imposed restrictive policies to contain the spread of the virus. And the Oxford University has come up with a way of developing an index to measure the stringency of the COVID-19 pandemic containment measures using a variety of indicators. And as you can see on the left, that's the stringency index. Most countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are dark red on the map that I show had very stringent containment policy measures in terms of lockdowns, closure of schools, restrictions in movements, curfews, public transport restrictions and guidelines. But there are also economic support policies that governments put in place, but these were not so common. And it is only South Africa, Nigeria, and I think Ghana that really tried to provide quite a lot of support to their populations. So most of the policies were aimed at containing the spread of the virus. But then these policies also had undesirable effects on the economic welfare of the population. So COVID-19 pandemic can have impact on food systems in a variety of ways, as I've mentioned. But one of them is direct health impacts when the people that are involved in the food systems or food system actors are affected directly by the disease. Two is the national policies to protect public health. I've already mentioned lockdowns, social distance requirements, market closures, border closures, and stuff like that. But also social protection measures that includes food assistance, import waivers, and also providing some financial assistance to the population. Global economic contraction that would affect the prices of imported foods and agricultural inputs, and also demand of agricultural exports. At the same time, like you know, many of the developing countries rely on remittances from abroad. That would be affected in case there is a contraction of economies in those countries. And then also decline in tourism. I think Kenya is an example here. National economic contraction that would reduce purchasing power of the population would affect the people's participation in the food systems in terms of buying food and offering services, buying services from the food system and also offering those services. Decline in domestic demand for agricultural products as a result of reduced purchasing power, in summary. Export restrictions in other countries. This one wasn't common, but we saw it at the beginning of the pandemic when some countries, I think Ukraine or Russia, was thinking about restricting the exportation of wheat, and they are very large exporters of wheat. So such would affect the supply of wheat in the world market, and then that would affect the food system. Again, macroeconomic stressors would also affect the food system. When, for example, public sector budgets shrink or much of the money is diverted, for example, from the ag sector to the health sector. And we know the ag sector is the most important in terms of food systems. So there are a variety of ways through which the COVID-19 pandemic and associated policy responses would affect the food systems in sub-Saharan Africa. So what we did, we conducted a systematic review of literature. By this, I mean, we systematically looked for studies that are around this topic, and we synthesized the findings and produced the information in a synthesized manner. And we followed a clear protocol that we developed to include or exclude a study. And that protocol guided us on beforehand where to look for the studies to include in the analysis. So, as I said, this took several steps. One, the literature search. Two, screening of that literature based on that protocol. Three, coded those documents looking at the policy responses that are being discussed or focused in those studies, the policy intent, the focus on subpopulations, and the impacts on the actors in the food system. And then we described the literature in a quantitative way, looking at the geographical focus, the topical focus, and the patterns across the outcomes of interest in those studies. And then we qualitatively synthesized that evidence, looking at mainly the impacts of the policies on the food system actors, the types of policies that were there, and other themes that emerged. And then we produce recommendations based on those. So overall, we found several studies that had been conducted on this topic, but the ones that passed our criteria were 57, and they were distributed, as you can see on the map there. Most of them were in the southern part of Africa, the central, the eastern, and the western. But even within those regions, there were some countries that no studies had been conducted around this area. And this included Niger, Chad, and Central African Republic, and South Sudan. And you can see, and even Somalia. Reading those countries will tell you that these are countries where there are currently conflicts going on, and therefore it perhaps was a challenge for researchers to conduct studies in those areas. But there are also others that didn't have conflicts, but we didn't find many studies on them. A case in point was Zambia and Tanzania. We know that what was happening in Tanzania at the time, and we conducted this work towards the end of last year. So 81% of those studies were quantitative in nature. The analysis was quantitative. 14% were qualitative, and 5% used mixed methods. And most of the quantitative studies were ex post analysis. In other words, looking at the effect of COVID-19 pandemic on food systems, ex post, not ex ante analysis. In terms of the policies that were discussed in those papers, we found that 74% involved restrictions on populations. And these restrictions included lockdowns and curfews and closures of schools, of entertainment places, social distancing, mandates, and stuff like that. And most of these policies, again, were aimed at protecting public health, so that the virus, the spread of the virus could be contained. But what we found was that most of the studies did not analyze causality of associated policy responses. And most did not try to disentangle the impacts across various pathways of impact, as I have indicated in the conceptual framework that I just presented. And most of the studies, again, nearly all of them relied on respondents to report on their perception about how the COVID-19 pandemic had affected them. We didn't find a study that was rigorously measuring the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the food systems. And again, none of the studies tried to measure the impact of the policies vis-a-vis the counterfactual situation where no policy response was taken. So I'm saying this because we might see later that these policies really affected food systems functions in the functions in the food system. But the questions that perhaps we should ask ourselves, what would have happened if these policies were not in place in terms of the effect of the direct effect of the pandemic on the population? Again, most of the studies did not evaluate the impact of the policy-specific nuances within larger policies. For example, if we had a curfew, and that curfew perhaps helped moderate the effect of the pandemic, the spread of the pandemic. But again, we know that it had some economic ramifications. The policies did not try to entangle such differences. So the distribution of the impacts as we observe them in the literature. On the studies that were looking at the impact of the pandemic on agricultural production, 78% of those studies found that agricultural production had declined. All of those that were looking at farmer incomes, the impact of the policies on farmer income, found that farmer incomes had declined. Again, majority that looked at labor availability found that labor availability also decreased. Majority also found that incomes of non-farmers also declined. And again, 88% found that imports and exports also declined. And food security of consumers were also affected. And food access was also a problem to majority of the consumers for those studies that were looking at that. And those that were looking at the effect of the pandemic on food prices, 71% found that food prices were reported to have increased. So this is a snapshot of the effect of the pandemic and the associated policy responses on the food systems. But then we can now go into details and find out and see what the studies found out about the effect of the pandemic on domestic food value chains, looking at agricultural inputs, agricultural production, trade, transport, processing and storage, and wholesaling and retailing. And then regional and international trade in terms of trade flows, in terms of traders and prices of imports and exports, and also food and nutrition security in terms of availability, access, and dietary quality, which is close to nutrition. So, in terms of agricultural input supply and prices, the evidence we found was that there were cases of decline in supply reported. This one was found in Kenya and in Senegal, for example. Prices of inputs were also reported. and both at wholesale and at retail level. There was also reports of reduction in the domestic purchasing power among potential buyers of inputs. And some agro-dealers reported a decline in the number of customers that were visiting their shops to buy inputs. And in terms of direct effect on producers and agricultural production, there were mixed results from various parts of the sub-Saharan Africa. In Zimbabwe, for example, small-scale farmers were not considered essential when lockdown measures were imposed. And so those farmers could not access their farms to go and conduct agricultural production. So that is an indication of how such policy responses could affect ag production. In Ethiopia, there was a report of shortage of daily workers in agricultural areas to work on the farms. But there were also volatility in agricultural prices. And this was mainly because of disruptions in transport of commodities. But there was also evidence of fewer traders buying from farm gate, at the farm gate from farmers, and also at lower prices. And one of the studies that I did here in Kenya, farmers reported that they were seeing fewer traders going into their villages to buy produce compared to some other years, and the prices were also low. In Mozambique, again, there was disruption in international input supply that led to 40% reduction in the use of inputs in Mozambique. And this led to a reduction in purchase of agricultural outputs from farmers by the exporting companies in that country. In terms of trade and transport, processing and storage, again, evidence showed a decline in transportation options and increased transport costs. Kenya can directly relate with this. And one of the studies, again, that I conducted found out that transportation was quite a problem. And this problem was exacerbated by the curfew that was in place. Although cargo, in Kenya, cargo transport was allowed, even food transport was allowed, but there were quite a lot of roadblocks on the way that would delay the transportation time of commodities, including food commodities, from one area to another. In terms of wholesalers and retailers, there are reports of difficulties, retailers and wholesalers reporting difficulties in sourcing food due to high prices or few suppliers. And again, in Kenya, talking with some traders in Nakuru County, they indicated that the curfew hours really affected the wholesale trade. And as we know, the wholesale trade in Kenya, especially in food commodities, takes place quite early in the morning. And because curfew hours were ending around 4 a.m., it would take the traders time to reach the market to conduct their trade. So that is how some of these policies would affect the food system at this node of the chain. There are also reports of closures and restrictions on informal markets, and this led to massive disruptions on the income earning activities of both retailers and vendors. And again, this one, Kenya can relate with this when some markets were closed. For example, Wangige in Kiambu was closed, and Wangige is a very important food market in the country. In some other places like Kakamega, some open air markets were closed down. In Isili, some the markets were closed down for a time. So those actions disrupted the normal operations of the food system actors in those markets. In terms of trade flows, regional and international trade, only 8 out of the 57 studies discussed imports and exports. But those found evidence of declines in regional trade, and this was mainly because of border clearance protocols that now were taking longer and congestion at border crossings. Again, Kenya can identify with this. When crossing the border from Kenya to Uganda was next to a nightmare because of the protocols that had to be observed. And one of the studies found that between March and May 2020, there was complete decline in exports and imports in Uganda by 36 to 37%. And this coincided with the time when Uganda completely prohibited cross-border small-scale trading with the neighboring countries. In terms of prices of imports and exports, again, there was some evidence of price increases for imported food items. We found this was reported in Mali. But looking at the prices of international prices of commodities from World Bank database, we didn't find significant changes in those prices relative to other years. So it means then that at the time this study, the studies that we reviewed were being conducted, the price movements at international level were still not quite much. Perhaps things have changed now because the pandemic has taken a little longer and the containment measures have been in place for a little longer. In terms of impacts on traders, regional and international trade necessarily, contraction of that would necessarily affect those whose livelihoods are dependent on international trade, and especially informal cross-border traders. And these are especially women, as one of the studies suggests that 70% of cross-border small-scale traders are women. So if then there are barriers to cross-border trading, like I mentioned above, that happened in Uganda, then this category of traders would be really affected. Lastly, in terms of food and nutrition security, there was disruptions in the food supply in markets, and this mainly affected imported products and perishable foods. And when Nairobi, for example, was locked down, there were a lot of cars parked at the roadside, along the roads around the city and around the Nairobi metropolitan area, where people are selling their wares and including food items on parked cars along the road. Now, if perishable commodities could not find a ready market, then we would expect a lot of losses in terms of waste. And my interview with one of the agricultural officers in Kiambu County confirmed that quite much milk was lost because of lack of market. In terms of access to food, several studies reported reduced economic access to food, mainly because of a decrease in the incomes of the people who participated in those studies. And the incomes loss were mainly because of lost jobs and restricted economic activities. There were also increased availability of remittances, both from abroad and also from within the country. As we know, the rural area is really integrated with the urban area socially and economically, and a lot of remittances come from the urban to the rural areas. And if the people in the urban areas that the rural people depend on to send money don't send because they have lost their jobs or their businesses are not doing well, then those people who depend on such remittances would have low economic power to purchase food. And there were also reports of increased food prices, and a study conducted in Nairobi found out that about 88% of the households that participated in the survey were not able to meet their food needs because of reduced income. And over half of them reported that they cooked less frequently because they didn't have enough money to buy adequate food. There was also reduced physical access to food because, as I said, some informal markets were closed down, street vending was banned in some cases, and those affected the supply of food. There was also reduced social access due to covariate nature of the COVID-19 shock, and this also which affected or disrupted the informal safety nets that people rely on, like international remittances and school closures that also prevented children from receiving food through school feeding programs. There are also reports of low dietary quality because households could not get enough of quality food that they needed, and they therefore adopted some coping strategies that affected their dietary quality. Evidence suggested that households shifted away from more nutritious and expensive foods, mainly dairy products, vegetables, towards some cheaper foods, especially staples. And some of the coping mechanisms also included skipping meals and reducing the size of the servings. All this would affect the dietary quality of the people. So in terms of impacts across subpopulations, yes?
We are just out of time. Can you summarize?
Let me summarize. Go to implications for the resilience of food value chains in sub-Saharan Africa based on this synthesis. One, it is informal markets are critical in terms of food source, especially for especially urban poor population that always buy in small quantities. And there is also an urgent need to devise ways of making the food system efficient in terms of preserving food along the chain. And this would include perhaps looking at cold storage systems that would reduce the vulnerability of perishable products, especially in cases where restrictions in movement and transport problems occur. There is also an opportunity for Africa to enhance intra-regional, intra-African trade. And this opportunity is presented by the recently formed Africa Continental Free Trade Area or Agreement. That would be very helpful in enhancing trade of food commodities within the African continent. Again, there is need to put in place good data systems that can provide information on agri-food data to help in decision-making to support the food system. Some of the recommendations that are based on the highlights I've made is this, to support the functioning of informal markets and strengthen the performance of the food value chains through some of the interventions that I've just mentioned would be useful. And in terms of analysis, rather in terms of recommendations for further research, it would be useful if the effects, the specific effects of these policies would be evaluated for causality so that we would know how the specific policies would affect the food systems and various nodes of the food system. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need to give him a clap. He will hear our claps. Eh? Thank you, John. I want you to keep on there just for 3 to 5 minutes. We have maximum 3 questions or comments, and then you can, we also don't want you to go. We are still going on with some presentations after this. So the floor is open, please. Burning questions or comments. And then we get one, any other person? I want to pick all those who have to comment. 1, 2, 3. Any burning on this side? So it's done. But you can still send your comments or questions through the system, okay?
Thank you. My name is Dr. Kirori from Laikipia University. Mine is a very short, maybe value addition comment on the issue of reduction to access to markets, especially in the face of COVID-19 pandemic. I think this gives a chance for a multidisciplinary research into how ICT, especially, can be used in this case to expand access to markets, either by using various platforms to ensure that as much as the lockdown and the curfews have happened, people can still trade, waiting upon delivery of market goods when the markets reopen. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rispa. I have a question on, he said about the perishable products. Maybe we can protect them through cold storage facilities, but I think this one will only apply to the large scale farmers. So how are we going to help the small scale farmers so that they can also be maintained in the market? Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Olwande, for the insightful presentation. And mine is about forecasting. It's been estimated that there will be 9 waves of COVID. I don't know whether there are studies that have forecasted on the impact of COVID on the food systems based on the interventions that have been put in place. Thank you.
Okay, one more.
Thank you, Prof. Mine is also more of just an inquiry. If maybe the research team would have also wanted to explore on some of the status and unique characteristics in countries such as Tanzania, who chose a different path from their neighboring countries. What is the status in terms of food systems, in terms of access, in terms of are they better compared to their neighboring countries who chose a different path, or what could have happened to them? Because of course, as you mentioned, is that a few studies may have emanated from that area. Thank you.
Any other very burning one? Very. Okay, I just want to add one, and then John, you don't have to answer all. You can, others, you can also respond through the. Me, I just wanted to ask you, I saw you showing that Kenya, I'm back home, that Kenya was one of the countries that implemented restrictions, almost all the 8. But when it comes to economic, maybe contribution towards how the government tried to help us, you said nothing. But when I look at the Ministry of Agriculture, the action policies, they indicate that they spent 3 billion Kenya shillings to try to support farmers' inputs so that farmers can get cheap inputs. I don't know whether this, from the policy background, you are the policy guy. Do you think these guys were just writing or they spent the money? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Wall. I will start with your question. That is very blunt. And
to comment on a few of those.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Thank you. I'll start with your question about the support that the Ministry of Agriculture indicated. They supported farmers to get inputs. I don't have the figures, but sporadically, but in some research that I've done, I saw counties. Some counties mentioned supporting farmers with inputs. But one thing that didn't happen last year was the fertilizer subsidy that the government usually provides farmers. The national government usually provides farmers. That did not happen. About the 3 billion that was spent, I'm not sure where it was spent, but one thing I know that there was no fertilizer subsidy that farmers were given last year by the national government, although some county governments supported farmers in providing them with inputs. I would want to go to perishable and cold storage and how small-scale farmers could be supported to make use of cold chains across the value chains. Yeah, this one, if it is being done, and I saw it, one of the projects that the Nyandarua County government is trying to do is to put a central facility for cold storage of Irish potatoes. Note that each farmer, small-scale farmer, would be having his or her own cold storage. But as long as there is a storage facility that the players in the value chain system can make use of to store their commodities, then that would help. In the grain sector, we have the warehouse receipt system that is being promoted, but then we don't have a search for the perishable commodities that could help the value chain actors, not necessarily small-scale farmers. And then in terms of exploring the unique characteristics of a country like Tanzania, which dismissed the COVID-19 and did not put in place measures to combat the spread, how are they performing in terms of food systems? Yes, this is an area where we really need to look at. But one thing that turned out was that getting data from such countries is also very difficult, because when the government puts restrictions in terms of information flow, getting the data by researchers to do the analysis is quite a huge challenge. Lastly, Dr. Karuri commented about the usefulness of ICT to expand access to market. Yes, I agree with this. And in one of my interviews with one of the agricultural officers in charge of marketing at the national government, there was an indication that trading on online platforms had gone up. And this included also some food commodities like eggs and bananas. At the same time, online ordering of already cooked food has also gone up. So this is an opportunity, as you say, where ICT technologies could be harnessed in order to promote marketing in the food system. Lastly, I think I'm answering them all. Professor, you'll forgive me. This is last one from Dr. Florence. I'm not aware about any forecasting that has been conducted in terms of the effect of COVID-19 or the impact of COVID-19 on the food system in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We want to appreciate you for the good presentation you have done and your responses. Please, some comments will be coming through the chats. Please, if you would be kind enough, you can be responding to them today or even as we continue with this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have 2 more papers that were to be done in the morning. And I would like, now you will be given 12 minutes. I know you are being given 15. And please, I have Kevin Obondo. And as Kevin does his 10 minutes, please help Kevin first. Please make sure you keep Mercy Rewe on the line so that she knows in the next 15 minutes she will be on.
So protocols observed, fellow researchers, good afternoon. I'm Kevin Obondo, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to present my findings on quality of water hyacinth, compost, and their likely effects on soil properties and crop production. I am a Master's of Science in Soil Science from Egerton University. Welcome. So our soils have a general trend in decline in fertility as a result of continuous cultivation, and this one cuts across the sub-Saharan Africa. And due to this decline, production has become nearly uneconomical without the use of amendments like fertilizers. And so most of our farmers has gone or relies on chemical fertilizers as alternative sources of soil amendments to improve productivity. But due to as majority of our farmers are small scale and are low resource endorsed, you realize that in most cases we apply the fertilizer in the low amount compared to the recommended rate, and as evidenced by a decline in production per unit area, especially for the high value crops or food crops, which are staple like maize, especially in the Lake Victoria region. As a result, there have been so many research conducted on different ways in which we can be able to enhance fertility. One of them is based on the use of organic amendment as alternative to chemical fertilizers, which are very expensive and most of our farmers cannot be able to afford. And one of the main limitations of now this organic amendment, for example, we have organic amendment like compost, is that the availability is a problem. Why? Because the raw materials required for their preparation have so many alternative uses that they cannot be available for this for that purpose. And so it's the water hyacinth, which has been found to be rich in essential plant nutrients. And so in this experiment, it was taken through 3 composting systems. And why composting system? It is because we understand that organic amendments like compost manure, farmyard manure, they are very bulky. And so most people do not prefer them because it is very difficult to transport them to our farms. And so coming up with a system which will give us a quality organic fertilizer will be of important value to our farmers. So one of the systems is what we refer to as vermicomposting, where we used earthworms to transform organic waste into more viable form on what we refer to as vermicast. Another one is the EM composting technology, where we are using effective microorganisms collected from the natural environment. And these organisms include photosynthetic bacteria. We have lactobacillus, we have Saccharomyces, then there's also fermenting fungi. They play a very important role in converting organic waste into economic value product. The other system is what our farmers normally use, which is the ordinary composting, also referred to as thermophilic composting, where you just put your materials, then you rely on the organisms on their natural settings. You find most of our soils, especially in the Lake Victoria regions, they are very acidic and very infertile. And due to this high cost of these inorganic fertilizers, our farmers have tried at their level best, but still they could not manage to reach the recommended rate. And moreover, the quality of compost prepared from water hyacinth has not been well documented. There's no available information on how we can use compost from water hyacinth. Therefore, this present study aimed at coming up with some of the pictorial representation to the solution and the use of water hyacinth as alternative. So the general objective of this study was to contribute towards sustainable agricultural development through the use of compost produced from water hyacinth for enhanced productivity and soil quality improvement. And the specific objectives were to determine the quality of the compost, to see the effect it can have on our soil when we apply it, and also to see the effect it will have on crop production using water hyacinth, using maize as a test crop. So the research hypothesis matches our specific objectives. So we find that in Kenya, agriculture is the basket contributing to more than 70% of employment and income in the country. And maize production, as an example of our staple food, from the previous finding, it has been found that we cannot produce enough maize to feed our population. Why? Because of some of the challenges discussed in the background. And therefore, if we can find ways like the use of organic amendments of improving our fertility for enhanced productivity, it will be of important benefit to our society. So the experiment was carried out in 2 environments. One was in Asembo Bay, that is in Siaya, Lake Victoria Basin. And another experiment was conducted in Kisii National Polytechnic in Kisii County. So there were 2 experiments. The first one, which correspond to the first objective, was to determine the quality of the compost. So it was prepared in Asembo Bay. Then the second experiment, which is a confirmatory test, was conducted in Asembo and in Kisii to see the variation. So those are some of the materials that were used in the experiment, and the pictorial represent some of the activities. The first one showing a member of the community-based organization based in Asembo, where the experiment 1 was conducted, harvesting water hyacinth. Then the second one, some of the members transporting it to the composting site. The third one is showing how the compost was dried. So the next is the compost preparation. Allow me to give you a snapshot on how the process was carried out. So that one shows the profile of how the materials were arranged for the composting system. We have the whole carpet at the top, followed by the food substrate and the worms. Then we have the sawdust, which act as bedding materials. For more details, we'll talk about later. So those are the red worms which were used for vermicomposting system. Then on the right side are the effective organism. This one actually you can obtain it from any agrovet. For ordinary composting, that is also a profile. You can see there's a temperature stick. That one is just used to check whether the composting is going on. Then for the EM composting, that is also the profile. So after composting, the next step was to determine its quality. And the table shows some of the methods and some of the parameters that were analyzed, like water holding capacity using the capillary action technique, the bulk density using the water displacement method, and many others. So after the first experiment, we moved on to the second one, which was now a confirmatory test to see what impact these water hyacinth compost types can have on our soils and on our crops. The field experiment was conducted in a random as complete product design, and these were some of the treatments. There were 5 treatments. The first one being water hyacinth vermicompost, the second one water hyacinth EM compost, the third one water hyacinth ordinary compost. The fourth one is a positive control where we used inorganic fertilizer or the chemical fertilizer. Then the fifth one was a negative control where no fertilizer was applied. So that was the experimental layout. And soil parameters, soil was analyzed before the commencement of the field experiment and after. And so some of the parameters and methods that were used to analyze them are indicated below. We can discuss that one also later in detail. Of course, there was planting using maize as a test crops, compost being applied at the rate of 5 tons per hectare, and inorganic fertilizer at the recommended rate of 200 kg per hectare. Maize hybrid 517 was chosen as the test crop. The management practices were carried out effectively. Then after that, in the course of the experiment, we also did some plant sampling because we want to know how we can relate the compost application and effect it's going to have on our plants. And those are some of the data that were collected. Maybe if I can stress on some of them, like the harvest index, which was done using the formula above. Then we also do something on nutrient use efficiency, where we had agronomic efficiency, we had apparent nutrient recovery efficiency. We also had partial nutrient balance using the formula.
Kevin, we want you to finish, please.
Okay, thank you. All the measured parameters were also analyzed, were taken through the normality test using the Shapiro-Wilk procedure. Then analysis of variance conducted in RCBD and mean separation using the LSD. So result and discussion. So the pictures represent some of the results. These were for a mature compost. The first one is a vermicompost. The second one is a thermophilic, and the third one is a EM compost. The same temperature variation during the composting system was significant, with the highest being 59.6. We also collected some data on compost maturity, and the one which achieved first maturity was EM compost, followed by the vermicompost. Then the compost were analyzed for different parameters, as shown below. There's also a saying that because water hyacinth grows in a lake, there are high chances that it can contain some phytotoxic compounds coming from the industrial areas. So we took it through a germination test to see whether it contains some chemical that may bioaccumulate to human when we consume the product that come from what we produce using it. And some of those are the parameters which were analyzed prior to field experiment. And those are some of the parameters that we analyzed after the experiment. So to stress on, vermicompost was found to be the most effective alternative to chemical fertilizers, which is economical and friendly to the most farmers. And in the picture below, you can see at the center there, that's where we did not apply any fertilizer. You can see how it is relating compared to other systems where we used organic and inorganic fertilizer. Okay, so we also did some yield parameters, evaluation, total ground biomass, grain yield, and harvest index. And the one which is of interest to the farmer is grain yield. And we realized vermicompost was very good. It was followed by inorganic fertilizer in both areas. We also did something on nutrient uptake, and still vermicompost emerged as the best. So from this study, it is without doubt that the use of water hyacinth compost can be a suitable remedy to the deteriorating soil fertility in the Lake Victoria region. And from our experiment, vermicompost was found to be the most suitable, and efforts that can be put in place to commercialize its production so as to contribute to existing effort in curbing the deteriorating soil fertility will be of important interest. Further studies may be necessary based on our experiment, where we can combine 2 or 3 systems and see how it's going to work. Initially considered as an noxious weed in the water, I can confidently say that water hyacinth is a future gold in the water, that everybody is going to struggle to get a piece to make use of it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. You have gone beyond my time. And so we only have one burning question, if there is. Silence means they were listening. And the questions will be in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's get the online presenter, Rewe. Is she connected?
Yeah, good evening. Just allow me to share my screen. Share screen.
Go on,
Mercy. Yes, Mercy. Yeah, it's me. I just wanted to share my screen so that I'll be able to present. What's happened?
Mercy, are you okay?
Yes, yes, please. I'm right here.
We are not seeing the screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to share. I'm trying to exit, minimize screen. Oh, I shared, but I don't know what happened.
Go down.
Let me try again.
Try to go down the screen and click share screen.
Yes, I clicked on that. Then I clicked on the presentation itself.
We are seeing just your folder. I think it's not open yet.
Oh, it's not open yet.
You have shared your file folder where the document is. Can you double click?
Okay.
Open the document first before you share. Just click the document and see you have it on the screen.
Okay.
Or what you do, just stop sharing first. Open your, when you have stopped sharing, go to your folder, double click your document and make sure it's on the presentation mode first.
Or presentation mode. Okay, let me put it on the presentation mode.
But close this one we are seeing. There's something we are seeing.
Okay, sorry about that. So I need to save.
Okay, click where the sharing is and click stop sharing.
Okay. Stop sharing. Yes, I clicked on stop sharing. Now I share again.
No, now open your document first.
Oh, okay.
Open it until you see it yourself. Eh?
Yes, I see it, please.
Are you seeing your PowerPoint on your
Yes. Yes, please.
Now go down and click share.
Is it visible?
Give it a few minutes. Eh?
Now?
Now we can see.
Is it visible yet?
Yes, go.
Okay, now you can see. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your guidance, and sorry for the delay. This issue of technology. My name is Masurewe. I'm a PhD student at Pwani University, and I am going to present to you just one of the objectives from a study. And this objective was trying to look at the possibility of using bioslurry as an alternative to inorganic fertilizers in increasing soil fertility.
And Mercy, just a minute. Eh?
Yes, please.
In the benefit of time, we want you to focus on the objectives and then the methods and then what did you got. We have only 12 minutes for you.
Okay, Sam. Thank you very much. That's what I've noted. So we will not go through the background actually because my predecessor has just discussed it, and I'm now looking at bioslurry. My concern is bioslurry, and as we are aware, bioslurry is actually a byproduct of anaerobic production of biogas from organic waste. So I want to look at the objective that we had. We wanted to study two different biodigester types, and we wanted to see the effect of bioslurry from the two biodigester types, that is flexi and fixidome, on as well chemical properties. But we also wanted to understand what happens when that bioslurry is integrated with inorganic fertilizers on the stem. So that's why it was done in our Royal Agricultural Training Center in Kiambu. So basically, this is just a graphical presentation of how it was, but these are the treatments. So in our treatment, we used 100% bioslurry from either biodigester types, and then we varied the bioslurry to 75%, and then we added, topped up to 25% of inorganic fertilizer, then we moved down to 50-50, and then we had 100% fertilizer, and then a control, and it was all laid out in a randomized complete block design with a split plot arrangement and 3 replications. Now maize was used as a test crop. So soil sampling was done before planting and after the 2 seasons of planting. So this slide here shows the effect of use of bioslurry from the 2 different biodigesters on soil chemical properties compared to the initial. So if you look at it, you'll notice that those boxes present where that element was in highest, after the 2 seasons. The second column is the initial, and generally there was an increase. There was an increase in these chemical properties when bioslurry was used, whether it is DOM or whether it is flexi. But except actually where we had magnesium or magnesium, the decrease was actually in magnesium. Something happened here. It was magnesium and calcium. But looking at it, we had higher nutrients. We had higher nutrients when DOM bioslurry was used compared to flexi, as you can see there in the boxes on the column under the DOM. And this could actually be explained by the fact that the DOM bioslurry, or rather the substrate, is not completely digested when it is used in DOM. So it means that there is further composting that goes on in the field, and compared to flexi, where it is assumed that there is complete digestion that takes place in the biodigester. And this can also be supported by the fact that the analysis of bioslurry from both biodigesters showed that the nutrients were much higher in flexi compared to DOM. Now, this one table here is talking about the effects now of the treatments, the 5 treatments you've seen on various soil chemical properties. This one is about pH and exchangeable acidity. So when you can notice that all the treatments increased the soil pH except where fertilizer alone was used. There was a decrease, but the others, including control, there was an increase. And when it comes to the exchangeable acidity, the effect was almost similar because they are interrelated. There was a decrease in exchangeable acidity when bioslurry was used, except now where about higher levels of fertilizer, that is 100 and also 50, were used where the exchangeable acidity increased. Now, we can say that the reason for the increasing soil pH with increase in bioslurry levels is because the base cations, the base cations were high in the bioslurry, but at the same time, the bioslurry was alkaline. And when it comes to the fertilizer, the increase, or rather the decrease in the soil pH was basically due to nitrification as well as uptake by plants. Now, this table here gives us a presentation of the effect of the treatment on the macronutrients. So generally, as we have said, there was an increase in these soil parameters when the treatments were done. There was an increase except on calcium as well as magnesium. Magnesium, actually, there was a decline from the initial. When all the other treatments were made, the levels went down. For calcium, there was either a decline, or there was a leveling, or there was an increase. But now, if we look at the total nitrogen and the total organic carbon, use of bioslurry, and especially higher levels of bioslurry, contributed to higher contents of those 2 elements. But notably, the phosphorus and potassium were highest when fertilizer was used. But you can see that those 2, total nitrogen and total organic carbon, as well as calcium and magnesium, were higher when either bioslurry alone or its integration with the inorganic fertilizers were used. So this is for the effect on micronutrients, and it's actually the same. If you look at manganese, copper, as well as zinc, there was the highest increase was when either bioslurry or its integration was used, although iron and sodium was highest in control. Now, it was noted that there was a correlation between the total nitrogen as well as total organic carbon, where both increased concomitantly, and this could be as a result of the fiber, or we can say the organic matter content that is usually higher in that was found to be high in bioslurry. And when it comes to the P as well as K values, these were higher. They were high. They were actually rated as high before and also after the treatment. And for the P levels, they are high because they have low mobility. And actually, it's not every P or phosphorus that is added to the soil that is utilized by the plant. But also considering that we have organic matter in terms of bioslurry, then it also means that they provided higher levels of adsorption sites that ensured that the nutrients can remain within the soil longer. Now, we know in calcium, but magnesium, we found that it was it declined generally, and this could be as a result of leaching. But at the same time, magnesium is not usually very strongly bound to the exchange site, so it is easily dislodged and hence lost through leaching. So this is actually a picture of the experiment site. And if you look at it, actually, it's not difficult, it's not easy to differentiate between which treatment was which, except for control, for sure, it is possible that help to improve soil, can help to improve the chemical properties of soil. In that, it raises the soil pH, but also it supplies plant nutrients and creates a better environment for availability of these nutrients, because it contributes positively to the soil structure, the soil texture, the soil physical, as well as biological properties. And because there is an issue of disposal, so it can actually be utilized in the farm. As recommendations, it is important to have a longer term experiment that will help us to understand better the long-term effects. But actually, the experiment was carried out in an area where there are usually so many other experiments that are carried out. The soils were not very deficient of nutrients. So it would be interesting to know what happens if bioslurry is used in a farm, in a normal farmer's farm, where nutrients may not be in very high levels. And also, we did not look at the effects on soil physical as well as a biological property, which would be interesting to know. And we only used about 400 milliliters of bioslurry per hill. So what would happen maybe if higher levels were used? So that is it. I tried to really rush through in the interest of time, but thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mercy. We want to thank you and clap for you. Mercy, just stand in there. We want to ask 1 or 2 questions very fast. Any burning question? 2. I have one here. I want one there. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mercy, for the presentation. I know I'm not a pure agriculturalist, so some of the things were floating, but looking at your recommendation, because I was about to ask the question, but then I saw it in the recommendation, wouldn't it have been also wise to find out on the level of impact on the other environmental factors that you mentioned in your recommendation? Because I felt that then they have a great impact on the outcomes that you have, and you may not be able to exclusively allude to those results, to the bioslurry that the plants were experimented on. Thank you.
So
Thank you very much.
I think that's a comment. You can consider it. So
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mercy. And we now, if you can still stay here and continue listening, it will be happy until your bundles goes off completely. Now I want to return it to Dr. Pondo. And before I return to her, I'm a noisy person. There is no way you can just come from lunch na mmekaa tu chini. Can you stand and we clap for those who are presented, even those who chaired in the morning, isn't it? And you shake a bit, eh? Yeah. Hey, looks like a class. Hey, you guys are serious. Please look at the sides, your side, and what do you see? Some human being, isn't it? Just say God is a very great person. If he created somebody like this, can you do something like that? So God is important, isn't it? Thank God for that. And then let's clap for those. Nani anajua nyayo? I'm sure many of these professors know that. You say nyayo, walikuwa nasema pingiza, isn't it? Pingiza papa you shake. So let's shake for them. Nyayo. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Prof, for the moderation, and thank you, Edwin, for the great job. So I welcome Dr. King'ao to take us through the next session, and he will be assisted by Dr. Clement Achimba. I'm really enjoying the presentations. I don't know whether you people are equally enjoying the presentations. And tomorrow, I request that we stop crowding on this side, so that we can be distributed across the hall. It seems like people really love this side. They want to flock on this side. So kindly tomorrow, let us try and distribute ourselves even to this other side. So welcome, Dr. King'ao and Dr. Achimba.
Thank you very much. I think we'll go straight to the presentation. And I want to welcome Okwala Mayabi to start off. That's from Egerton University. So we'll take a very short time, and because of a time factor, we'll give each presenter 10 minutes and 5 minutes for additional either queries or other remarks. So it's still your part of your time, the 15 minutes. So I want to welcome aboard Mr. Okwara to take us through his presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Daktari. I'm Okora Wilberforce from Egerton University. Since morning, everyone has been talking about food, but you have not asked yourself, how do you prepare that food? That's why when I come key into this hall, I'll be talking about the effect of process parameters and feedstock on briquette qualities. My supervisor is Dr. Engineer Kabok from Jaramogi and Dr. Caroline Maina from Egerton. Statement of the problem: actually, wood fuel is the main source of energy in Kenya, regardless of emission that is released from burning of those wood. But then biomass is generated in bulk and cause environmental problem. And this biomass can be utilized in briquetting. However, briquettes made from one feedstock have shown very poor characteristics, but briquettes from two feedstocks have shown improved characteristics. However, we do not know, or little is known about briquettes with more than two feedstocks, their effect, and so on. The broad objective of this study was to evaluate the effect of process and feedstock parameters on briquette properties. To attain that, I had to look on specific objectives. Number one was to determine the optimal combustion properties of briquette based on mixed ratios, determine the effect of selected briquettes on performance properties, then to determine the effect of emission released from briquettes compared to Checo. And that was my main aim, this specific objective number 3. Justification: growing energy demand actually is one of the major challenges facing the world today, but through the understanding of engineering agglomeration properties, waste can be minimized through alternative uses, and that's by briquetting. So briquetting will reduce the increasing energy demand and emission released from wood. Sustainable Development Goal, SDG number 7, will be attained through that. Actually, scope and limitation, I was mainly interested in 3 feedstock, that's rice husk, corn cobs, and sugar bagasse. The reason as to why I chose these 3 is because they can be found at one located point, that's Kisumu. We can find corn cobs from just local farmers, rice husk, Ahero, bagasse, Muhoroni. Mixed ratios, you can see we have 9 mixed ratios. That's because we have 3 feedstocks, and using Taguchi technique, if you have 3 parameters, each parameter can be varied in 3 levels, meaning you'll have 9 mixed ratios. Actually, technology I'll be using drum kiln that I fabricated and drum agglomerator that I used in our school, Nakuru town. Properties I'll be checking at combustion, performance, and emission released from these briquettes compared with charcoal. This the experimental kiln design. Actually, it's just part of it. This is the burning part. I extracted the condensation system. I know people from environment to tell me burning feedstock releases a lot of smoke. I took that into account, and I had to add there a condenser where I condensed the smoke used by people from agronomy. So this is just the kiln, drum kiln. Optimization, that was specific objective number 1. Actually, let me go straight to results and discussion. Objective number 1 was optimization of combustion properties of briquette based on mixed ratios. I wanted to find out from these 9 mixed ratios, which mixed ratio was best to use as a fuel. And for any material to be assumed to be a fuel, it has to have ash content, that's AC, of less than 7%, volatile matter 20 to 30%, fixed carbon more than 75%, calorific value, which is the main component, more than 20%. Yes, you can see all these mixed ratios are having calorific value of more than 20%, but then we cannot assume other factors. Therefore, we had to look into fixed carbon. Looking at fixed carbon, we'll eliminate nearly all except this 3:3:1, the last one, second last, and I think the fourth from bottom. What can you tell? The mixed ratio was in rice husk, corn cobs, and bagasse. As bagasse is reducing, you can see fixed carbon increases. Maybe we can say after you have carbonized the feedstock, you cannot bond them into briquette directly. So you have to add a binder. Molasses was used as a binder. Molasses comes from sugarcane, and we are again using bagasse. Let me hope you are getting something. Molasses is non-combustible. That's, I think, the reason as to why if you see bagasse increasing, fixed carbon is reducing. That was specific objective number 1. Discussion is everything that I've just said. Specific objective number 2 was to look at the performance characteristics. When you're looking at performance characteristics, actually, we are looking at time to boil, burning rate, specific fuel consumption, and power output. Actually, in performance of briquette, I had to check in 2 tests, that's cooking test and water boiling test. I measured in water boiling test where I had to take higher power phase that include cold start and hot start, then low power phase that deals with simmering. Time to boil average was 14 to 14.5. High power phase, which is okay because it's recommended that time to boil should be between 14 minutes to 20 minutes for domestic cooking. Burning rate was okay, 24 grams per minute. From table 4.2, actually that one I've already said, burning rate increased from cold to hot start, and that's because increased temperature in combustion chamber, since the hot start began after cold start when the Jiko was still hot. Specific fuel consumption based on calorific value of the fuel was greater than recommended 0.02 megajoules per minute. That's according to ISO IWA 2013. My main interest was here, effect of emission released from briquettes compared to charcoal. Actually, we are doing ourselves a lot of harm using this charcoal. You can see from the results that I obtained, first, briquette, I had to use 0.68 kilogram and they burned for 3.7 hours. We only needed 0.75 kilogram to burn to cook amount of meal. Okay. But in charcoal, we needed 0.55 kilogram to burn for only 2 hours. That was not even the interesting part. Come to emission released. When you use briquettes, actually, the average indoor air concentration was 94.7 ppm, that's CO2. And in CO was 15.5. Then particulate matter, that's 0.03. but emission that were released after using those briquettes, CO2 was 1065.5, CO was 110, particulate matter was 0.18. Now look at the charcoal. CO2 was at first was 243.2, even more than double the briquettes. CO was 62 and particulate matter was 0.41. But the emission released after burning of this charcoal to became 1,670.4, 270.5, and particulate matter 0.95. In discussion, briquettes emitted the lowest amount of CO2, CO, and particulate matter as shown above. Actually, there was a significant difference of 95% in emission between the two fuels. Emissions were reduced by more than 50% when you use briquettes than charcoal. Then, although all the fuels had calorific value more than 20 megajoules per burning time differs significantly. Conclusion, actually, bagasse mass fraction had predominant effect on all property investigated. Then performance properties of briquette was significantly affected by type of biomass. And then number 3, recovering biomass for briquette production contributes to additional fuel that greatly reduce greenhouse gases and deforestation. Recommendation, actually, I recommend number 1, several biomass to be tested with different mixed ratios and the calorific value known to substitute charcoal. Number 2, comparative study on performance of different biomass fuel types with same ratios to be done. Then last one, alternative fuel source to be established to replace this charcoal to reduce indoor emissions. These are some of the references that I used in my work. And this is the drum kiln that's found in Nawasco that I used to make those briquettes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okwara. You have just used 11 minutes. You have 4 more minutes that we can be able to interact with the audience. So we want to request for some questions. At the same time, you can post your other queries on the chat. 1 or 2 questions. Facilitator, please walk the mic fast enough.
Wilberforce, that is excellent.
Thank you, Prof.
Creative and also useful. What I wanted to know is, you know those technologies?
Yes.
In terms of the waste is available, but what you used, that machine.
Yes.
You know, you need something that goes immediately to farmers. We want research that is ready to go. Now you are saying this item is available somewhere. How much?
Actually,
I'm a money person, eh?
yes.
How much, how available, how easy accessible, how easy usable by farmers, eh? So that you can sell this thing immediately.
Okay. Just to answer that question.
And then, no, the last one on that. You see, the language is academic, I know. Think about how you convert this thing into easy. You tell them, you know, you are talking about calories, eh? I don't know what technical words, eh? CO2, what. I think you should find a way also of transforming it easier.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the user, but
yes.
It's very good information.
Thank you. Maybe to...
Thank you very much. I just have a concern on this preparation of briquettes, I think we are going to use the smoke will be emitted.
Yes.
And that one start contributing to pollution of the environment vis-a-vis will affect the issue with climate. So if that, so how can you reduce that emission of that smoke so that we try to conserve environment as we try to adopt these technologies? Then again, we are going to use firewoods for us to heat these things and we get the product. Either you are going to use the natural plants. Some are medicinal, other fruit plants. So how can you minimize, or which kind of energy you propose for your study to use to avoid effect on the climate? Thank you.
Let me begin with him. Thank you. Actually, if you are very keen, I said, on that carbonization kiln or drum kiln, I extracted the condenser, where I said that the condenser was used to condense the smoke that was produced during carbonization into liquid form. That liquid form, actually, I did not want to go into that much because agronomists are there. I said that liquid can be used either as a fertilizer or pesticide. It only depends with the ratio in which you are mixing with water. If you mix it with 1:50, I think from literature 1:50, it goes to fertilizer. If you mix it 1:100, it goes to pesticide. Thank you. Prof, you are talking about availability of drum agglomerator. Actually, the one I used at Nawaskol was when I was still taking my results. After that, university saw the project in which I was taking, they are more interested in it. We have made more of this drum agglomerator. I think next month you are going to Baringo. You have heard of Madenge plant in Baringo. Give me 1 year, it will be normal. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a hearty clap. So at this juncture, I want also to invite Rangat Nicholas to take us through the screening of Zia maize in 10 minutes as usual, and the 5 minutes for interactions.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Nicholas Lagat, a PhD student from Egerton University. I'm going to present phenotypic screening for gray leaf spot disease in maize.
Maybe you get nearer to the mic.
I'm going to present this part of my objectives, a PhD objectives, phenotypic screening of gray leaf spot resistant in maize, inbred lines in Kenya. Worldwide, maize is among the leading crop in terms of grain production. However, production is constrained by a myriad of diseases, and these diseases range from fungal, viruses, and even bacterial diseases. And in Kenya, especially in Western Kenya, diseases are mostly predominant. This is because of environmental conditions that are conducive for development of many diseases. That's a pictorial of a GLS disease. And the question comes, why do we need to manage this GLS disease? Why do we need to control this type of disease?
One of them is to prevent economic losses. In terms of grain production, you find that this disease happened mostly, affecting maize, mostly during flowering stage. And thus, it affected the grain productions. So one of the things is that it reduced the yields. It reduced the yield in terms of grain production. It increases the production cost. When we say production cost, we talk in terms of control measures, because most of the farmers use chemicals, which are costly to them. Also, poor quality of grains. You find that this disease affected the grain in terms of lodging. And secondly, it guarantees food security. You find that one of the pillars, the 4 pillars of the government, is the guarantee food security. So in reduction of yield, you'll find that the food security won't be there. These are 2 pictorial of 2 regions, 2 agroecological zones. One is on higher elevation, and the other one is on lower elevations. So Kakamega is one of the regions that is under low elevation, and Egerton is one of the regions that's high elevations. So if you can see the pictorial there, you find that the disease density or the disease pressure in Kakamega is higher compared to the Egerton. Maybe later on I'm going to explain why the disease pressure is higher on the lower elevations. My objective was screening and selection for disease-resistant genotype for incorporation into breeding program. You find that in breeding, screening is a preliminary step in selecting a resistant variety, especially when you are dealing with a disease. So you must do screening. And when you do screening, you must do screening on a very many genotypes, very many lines, so that you select a few that you'll propel them to the next stage of breeding cycle. And collection of phenotypic data through appropriate scoring scale. I will explain the scale I was using. And methodology, stage of disease screening, first of all, you need screening and selection of parents. And that's why I say you need a very wide lines so that you come up with the best. And then identify good source of resistance for use as a donor traits. That's done in nursery development. And I was able to do it in Kakamega, Kakamega, and F1 screening. So you can do F1 screening per C crossing, where you combine crossing at the same time, you are able to do screening. This is useful for you to, maize take longer time. So you reduce the cycle of breeding. Preparation of inoculum, samples were collected from 3 counties in Kakamega, in Western Kenya, the Western province. That was Busia, and Bungoma, and Kakamega. And most of you will ask, why 3 counties? The GLS disease has 2 strains and is affected by environment. So you can find that the strain in Bungoma or Busia is not the same as the strain in Kakamega. So I was able to collect them, the 3 locations, so that I can bulk them together. So the selection comprises of farmers' field, the research station, and trial sites. How do we do inoculation? You find that when you are dealing with the disease, you can do it naturally or you do artificial inoculations. So in my research, I did artificial selection where the collected leaves were grinded or milled into pottery form. And then I was able to introduce into plants, maize plant, into a midrib, that's the final part, the upper part. And I was able to repeat it 14 days after the first inoculation, so that you are sure that those plants that were not able to be inoculated are inoculated lastly. Data collection, I did data collection on yield components as shown on my screen. And the disease, the scaling of the disease was between 1 and 9, where 1 is the resistant variety and 9 is the most susceptible variety. This scoring was done according to the CIMMYT scale and Carol Kakamega. Data analysis, the data was analyzed using Darwin software, version 6.
If you can go to the results.
And dendrogram was constructed. When we come to results, you can find that out of 45 lines, there were selected lines in Kakamega that show resistance according to table of means. I was not able to put table of means, but using the table of means, I was able to construct a dendrogram tree where it groups these varieties into different groups according to their resistance levels. So you find that like variety KTL means Kakamega lines, it was able to be ranked the first one in terms of resistance level. When you come to dendrogram, that's a dendrogram tree, you find that that dendrogram was constructed out of table of means, and it grouped these genotypes according to their levels of resistance. So you can find those who were resistant were ranked in one group, and those who were not resistant were ranked in another group. This is very important because it informed the choice of selecting your variety for a breeding program, so that you cannot transfer the old varieties, for example, 45 lines, into the next level without doing anything. So this was very interesting in selection of those genotypes. And I had said earlier that the study was done under a stress environment, because you do it under a stress environment because these are conditions that farmers encounter daily. So
you have 1 minute to finish.
When you are doing breeding, you do it in a stress environment. In Egerton, it was even very interesting because you find that varieties that was ranked the first one in Kakamega in terms of resistance were not resistant in Egerton because of environment, genotypes, and host resistance. And that one shows us that a dominant effect is very important when you are doing a breeding, because a resistant genes can be silent sometimes. When you take it to a favorable condition, it shows up. And that's why dominant effects is important. That's again dendrogram of Egerton. And another very important point I want to stress is that apart from dominant effects, we have additive effects in plants. When I talk of additive effects, after crossing, the genes can be transferred from one plant to another one, and it gives even a stronger level of resistance. Conclusion is that I was able to select the lines that were resistant, and I took them to the next program. And another conclusion is that in my study, it revealed that environment contributed a lot in variation of these genotypes. So what does it mean? It means that during screening for resistance in diseases, you must consider the environment. I would like to acknowledge the World Bank through the Center for Excellence for giving me this chance. I'm also grateful to Professor George Award, Director SISAM, for supporting this program. Lastly, my supervisors, Professor Woche and Dr. Ohio, who provided a lot of comments and suggestions in these presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Nicholas. I think the issue of screening of resistance to gray reef spot disease. Now, we have about 2 minutes because you have exceeded your own time. 2 minutes for reactions, additions, and others. At the same time, I will encourage Florence to be ready from Pwani University and the ICT team to be able to help Florence. So, questions or reactions?
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. From a layman's perspective, a smallholder farmer who wants quick fix solutions to the problem. I've indicated that this study has now moved to another level, and whereby there's another breeding program for further improvement. So is there light down the tunnel, and how long will it take for this new variety which can address the GLS disease to be out?
Thank you, Daktari. Now I'm doing F3, and with the new technology of biotechnology, molecular analysis, I don't need to go further. I need to do molecular analysis where I will be able to see the genes. So when you see the genes at F3, because for release of variety, you need to go around 6 cycles. That's around 6 years. But now with biotechnology, that's the next objective I'm doing right now. I'm looking at the gene level at F3 and F2. F2 vis-a-vis F3. These genes will show me this variety, whether it's resistant or susceptible. So I'm going to reduce the cycle by almost half.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I think we give him a hearty clap again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, asante sana. I hope Florence from Pwani, Kazungu, you are online. Kasungu, ICT, do you see Kasungu, Florence? If not, then we go to is Kasungu on, please, ICT? Kasungu, Florence from Pwani. Florence from Pwani, are you on? We can't hear you, Florence. We can see your screen sharing. Florence. Hello, Florence. Are you on? ICT, any response? We can continue with the next one as we hold our. Okay, we can move on to the next one. And that is Mercy. Mercy, please take the podium. 10 minutes. Mercy, you are right in your time. Good. You can continue.
My name is Mercy Mikali from Egerton University. I'm undertaking MSc Food Science, and I'll be presenting my findings on probiotic properties and safety profiling of Lactobacillus plantarum, isolated from spontaneously fermented milk amabere amaruran. Well, we might ask ourselves, what are probiotics? Maybe you have heard somewhere people are campaigning about probiotics. They are live microorganisms that, when administered properly, they confer health benefits to the host. Well, fermented food with these live probiotics, they are considered as functional foods, as these probiotics give us a beneficial therapeutic effect to our bodies. Some findings have suggested that probiotics, they have anti-cancer effect. Some have suggested that they reduce the cholesterol level in our bodies. Others have been found that they reduce infection, GIT infection in our bodies. So they have many benefits that are still being tested. And among these probiotics, mostly we have bifidobacterium and lactic acid bacteria. Well, they have been used both in animals and in human beings. Lactobacillus plantarum is one of the lactic acid bacteria that has been widely studied and used in production of fermented foods. Well, in our nation, fermented foods are spontaneously produced. Well, these have, you find that these products, they have inconsistent quality. So they pose danger to our bodies because they are not controlled. So coming up with the probiotics that can be used as starter cultures for these fermented foods will be very beneficial. We find that there are many isolates that have been isolated from locally fermented foods, but they have not been made to commercially probiotics that can be used to production of these fermented foods. Well, in our study, in our present study, we evaluated the probiotic properties and determined the safety profile of this Lactobacillus plantarum isolated from the Kenyan fermented milk. Well, there are guidelines that have been outlined by FAO and WHO to which we can undertake this, we can be able to evaluate these probiotic properties. Number one is the GIT survival. Our body is meant in such a way that it is meant to protect itself. Number one is the survival of the stomach acid, which is a very harsh environment. A probiotic should be able to to survive this environment and colonize the GIT and be able to give us these benefits. Also, they should not have antibiotic resistance, and also they should have an antimicrobial activity. In our methodology, for the probiotic properties, we checked for the temperature sensitivity at these different temperatures. We checked for acid tolerance. We also tested for phenol tolerance, 0.4%. We also did antagonistic activity. For the safety profiling, we did hemolytic activity and antibiotic susceptibility against different antibiotics. To our results, there have been numerous attempts to have these locally isolated microorganisms to be isolated so that we can measure their benefits to our bodies. And so in our temperature, we checked the temperature so that we can know that they can be able to survive the body temperature and also to know their condition during industrial production. So the temperature for the Lactobacillus plantarum, it was found to survive well in 30 degrees and 37 degrees Celsius. Its viability decreased at 20 degrees and 45 degrees. Its optimal temperature was 37. So this showed that it could survive the body temperature. For the acid tolerance, for it to be able to survive the stomach acid, normally the standard is pH of 3. For the, as you can see from the line graph there, the Lactobacillus plantarum, with the increase in pH, it was able to, its viability decreased even though not to 0. Some of them were able to survive. And these few that survived can be able to colonize the GIT and be able to accrue these benefits. For the phenol, the reason why we did phenol, there are toxic metabolites that are produced in the intestines as regular bioproducts of aromatic amino acids. And this affects the probiotics in that they have bacteriostatic effect and they can hinder this microorganism from growing. And so for the Lactobacillus plantarum, you can see from the control and the one that had 0.4% phenol, they had no much difference. It's actually tolerant to 0.4% phenol. For the antagonistic activity, we can see that we tested the Lactobacillus plantarum against Salmonella, Escherichia coli, Staphylococcus aureus, Candida albicans. These are pathogenic microorganisms that people normally got foodborne disease from. So as you can see, Lactobacillus plantarum was able to reduce this microorganism, to be able to hinder their growth, starting with Salmonella, and Candida albicans was a bit resistant. So this is very important when it comes to protecting our GIT from pathogenic infection. Like just now we have come from taking lunch. You don't know whether that food has some pathogenic microorganism inside. It's just trust and have faith that you'll not become sick when you have eaten that food. But when you have this probiotic microorganism, they are able to hinder the growth of this pathogenic microorganism and maintain a healthy microbiota. And also when we use them for fermentation, they are able to increase the shelf life and also reduce food spoilage. So for antibiotic susceptibility, we tested about 7 antibiotics. There have been some researchers have said that probiotics should be resistant to antibiotic in that when you consume antibiotics, when you are sick, they are able to survive. But now there is another question whereby what if these microorganisms are able to pass gene resistance to other pathogenic microorganisms and they are able to dominate our GIT. So there is that conflict, and so it's safe to say that the Lactobacillus plantarum, it was sensitive to most of these antibiotics. You can see, for example, anthromycin, ciprofloxacin, these are tetracycline, gentamicin, chloramphenicol. They are most common antibiotics that we use. This is a picture. For the first photo, it's for nalidixic acid. It's an antibiotic. You can see the lactobacillus was a bit resistant. The second one was for tetracycline. You can see it was really hindered. You can see that space there, the zone of diameter in inhibition. It's quite large. So for safety profiling, we did hemolytic activity, whereby we checked whether this probiotic microorganism has any virulent factor or is it pathogenic. And so for a probiotic, it should not be able to hemolyze blood or have any virulence factor. And so for the Lactobacillus plantarum, it was shown that it did not have any clear zone. When we stick it, you can see from the petri dish, or no greenish zone was observed. So in this case, we say it is not virulent, it had gamma hemolytic activity. In conclusion, this study demonstrated that Lactobacillus plantarum is an excellent probiotic candidate. It exhibited high potential owing to its high resistance to pH, to temperature, to phenol, and its antibiotic susceptibility, and also its ability to be able to prevent the growth of other pathogenic microorganisms. And so with this probiotic Lactobacillus plantarum, we can be able to use it as a starter culture to our local fermented foods. And so, but this study was a bit limited, so there is need for more probiotic parameters and in vivo activity of the isolate to be investigated to validate its immunodilatory, nutritional, and health benefits. And I would like to acknowledge the first person who did isolate this microorganism, Mr. Sichangi, and also my supervisors, and Susan for funding my work through World Bank. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mercy, for that very wonderful presentation. And without further ado, we want to welcome the audience. If you have 1 or 2 comments, and also those who want to present them in the chat, and she will continue interacting outside maybe this session through the chat. So 1 or 2 questions. Okay, thank you very much, Mercy. That was a wonderful presentation. And we hope that the yogurt that we took at lunch hour had a bit of that. So we go on to the next one. I will invite Carol, if she is around. The ICT, you can be looking for the 2 presenters from Pwani, either through phone, and if they are ready, then we can go straight on to them.
Hello. I'm ready. I'm Florence from Pwani. I'm ready to present.
Okay. Pwani, just hold on. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
As this one, please. Let one of those who are physically here present. We'll come back to you, Pwani.
Okay, thank you.
Pwani, I'm told the physical presenter is not yet linked. Can you go ahead, please?
Okay. May I share my slides first?
Okay, you will share in a moment. Just connecting. We can see your screen.
Yes.
Would you mind going on ahead 10 minutes, please? And
Okay.
5 minutes for interaction.
Thank you. My names are Florence Kazungu from Pwani University. I'm an MSc agronomy student. My supervisors are Dr. Esther Muindi, Dr. Mlinge, and Dr. Wamkota. My title is Performance of Selected Sorghum Varieties on Titanium Mined Soils in Kwale County, Kenya. Sorghum is the world's 5th most important cereal grain after maize, rice, wheat, and barley. It is a native tropical crop. It is a native to tropical Africa. It is widely produced in the tropical, semi-tropical, and arid regions. It has the ability to withstand harsh conditions, and it serves as the main staple food in the poorest world and also the food insecure population. Due to these characteristics, it is referred to as a camel of the plant kingdom. It has 4 categories. That is grain, which is used as a staple food in the tropical areas and also a raw material for making beer. The broom category is also used for making brooms. And then we have the sweet and grass category, which is used for making sweetened syrup, and green feed. This study was carried out in a mining company. As we know that mining is a crucial and is crucial in our countries, or for it promotes the economy of the country by providing some employment opportunities. However, on the other hand, the mining processes have some negative effects on the environment as it degrades land of its original productive value. Mining processes also destroys the ecosystem by displacing the inhabitants and altering the soil profile. This will lead to nutrient and carbon pools depletion, microbial ecosystem destruction, and moisture holding capacity interruptions. After mining, as I said, Best Titanium Limited is a mining company. It uses a method that does not use chemical to destroy the environment or to cause pollution to the environment. After mining, the company fills the mined areas by compacting soil layers to ensure stability. And after that, a thin topsoil layer from the original soil is spread on top. These compacted layers hinder root from penetrating into the lower horizons, and also it will hinder water infiltration. Hence, these conditions can lead to waterlogging conditions in the short run. As we know, in these coastal soils, which is especially Kwale County, it is sandy textured. Sandy soils also pose more problems due to poor water holding capacity and stability. Therefore, successful reclamation in such soils will require proper irrigation regime and also good choice of plant species. The Best Titanium Limited land in Kwale was initially an agricultural land under crop production. So this study was carried out to evaluate the potential of titanium mined soils to support sorghum production, thus promote food security in the area. We go to the objective. My main objective of carrying this experiment was to investigate the potential of titanium mined soils to support sorghum production. Methodology. The experiment was carried out in Best Titanium Limited, Kwale County at the Southern Dune. Experimental layout, design and crop husbandry. The treatments were laid out in a randomized complete block design with a split plot arrangement and replicated 3 times. The treatments include the varieties, that is 2 sorghum varieties, Sila and Gadam, and the amendments include the farmyard manure, DAP fertilizer, DAP plus farmyard manure, and the control. Methodology, we have the agronomic practices. Weeding is very crucial in sorghum production, as weeds compete with crops for nutrients and water during this period. So weeding was done after 6 to 8 weeks after germination. And also there's a second agronomic practice, that is thinning. Thinning was also done 2 to 3 weeks, as also the plants compete themselves for nutrients. Pest and disease control. This was applied when there was an economic threshold of about 10% infested plants in a sorghum field. And in my case, the pest that was a challenge to this study was the armyworm. And I sprayed Confida 500 mils per 20 liters of water. Methodology, we have data collection. There was initial and final soil sampling per plot for about 0 to 30 centimeters depth. And also plant growth parameters, where I took plant height, number of leaves, and other growth parameters that I did not in the other document. And also we have the yield parameters, where we have the weight of sorghum grains. Data analysis. Data was subjected to analysis of variance using Genster statistical software and means of separated using the Duncan new multiple range test of 5% level of significance. Soil analysis. This is the soil analysis table. The initial soil, after analysis, we had phosphorus. We tested the pH where it was optimal. Phosphorus was low, potassium was low, calcium was optimal, and nitrogen was also low. Results. The effects of the treatments amendments on growth of 2 sorghum varieties. I used plant height to compare the 2 varieties. And that is, we have a table there of the amendments from week 1 to week 7. We have control, manure, fertilizer, manure, and fertilizer. Looking at the table there, we can see the plant height on this Sila variety was high in manure and fertilizer, followed by fertilizer, then followed by manure and control. On the graph also, we can see the manure and fertilizer being high, plant height being high from week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, followed by fertilizer, and then manure and control. Effects of the amendments on growth of the 2 sorghum varieties. The plant height is high in use of manure plus fertilizer plots in both varieties. Low heights experience in the control plots. Look at the panicle height, which is another growth parameter. Using the same amendments, we have control, manure, fertilizer, manure and fertilizer. On the table, we also have the panicle height being high on the plots with manure and plus fertilizer, followed by fertilizer, then manure and control. There we have the graph for the panicle height in the Sila variety. The panicle height on the Gadam variety, also we have a table there from week 8 to week 12. That is when I started collecting the panicle height data. And also down there we have the graph. Effects of the amendments on the growth on the panicle height. The plots with manure plus fertilizer recorded high panicle height in both varieties, with control recording the lowest panicle height. Then effects of amendments on yields. We compared the Sila variety and the Gadam variety on all the treatments, where we have control manure, fertilizer, manure plus fertilizer. And looking at the yields on the Sila variety, we have the plots with manure plus fertilizer giving us the high yields, while the control plots give us the lowest yield. Also on the Gadam grain yields, looking at the table, we have the manure plus fertilizer plots giving us the highest yield and the control giving us the lowest yield. Conclusion. Growth and yield data collected showed that optimal use of manure plus fertilizer can support optimal sorghum production in these soils. Recommendations. The use of manure plus fertilizer can support optimal sorghum production in soils. Further research is required to investigate on the tillering ability of sorghum to increase yield and long-term production of sorghum to promote sustainable soil development and food security in the country. Thank you. That is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Florence, for that very informative presentation. We now take one question that may be burning from the audience, physically here, Trikipia. And if not, then we'll request if others, they can post them through the chat box. Any burning question? Okay, thank you very much, Florence. You can continue checking in the chat box if there will be any query or reaction that you can respond to. I now get back to, okay, sorry for that. Let's give her a hearty clap. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So I revert back to Carol. If you are ready now, Mercy to be on waiting.
My name is Carol Mutua from Egerton University, a PhD student in horticulture. I'm going to present just one objective from my work titled Micronutrient and Vitamin C Content of Pepino Melon as Influenced by Growing Environment and NPK Fertilizer Rates. I'm going to take you through from the introduction to acknowledgement, and the picture there shows pepino plants in the greenhouse at Egerton University. On the introduction, pepino melon originated from the Andean region, belongs to the family Solanaceae. It is cultivated in Central America, Morocco, Spain, Israel, and in the highlands of Kenya. It is a crop which has a potential for horticultural diversification. The fruit is attractive, juicy, and is sweet. It is used as a fruit. Green mature fruits are cooked in other countries, but not in Kenya. It is used as a fruit salad, juice, and to make ice cream. It also has medicinal properties like management of diabetes and hypertension. It is rich in vitamin C, thiamine, niacin, riboflavin, and minerals like calcium, phosphorus, and potassium. And it was introduced in Kenya in 2013. Vegetables, pepino melon is a vegetable, though the part which is consumed is a fruit, are the cheapest sources of nutrients and vitamins which are needed for human health. And over 2 billion people in the world suffer from iron deficiency and other micronutrient deficiencies. And you find that most soils in Africa have either one micronutrient deficiency or multiple, including zinc, iron, copper, manganese, and boron. And this affects crop production and the nutritional quality of the produce, and this may affect human health. The increase in deficiencies in micronutrients is due to intense cultivation, leaching, soil erosion, and unbalanced application of fertilizers. Vitamin C is essential as an antioxidant and as an enzyme cofactor in many metabolic processes. Deficiency of vitamin C can cause anemia, scurvy, and those others. And most of the vitamin C in human diets is supplied by fruits and vegetables, pepino melon being one of them. And the production of vitamin C depends on metabolism of the plant, nutrient supply, and water supply. On materials and methods, the study was carried out the horticulture research and training field, Egerton University, I used 2 growing environments, the field, open field, and a greenhouse, which was 8 meters by 60 meters. And the covering material was purchased from Amiran. I obtained pepino seedlings from garlic and pepino farm in Nakuru. And the spacing used was that one. In the field, I had 24 plants per plot, and I had 5 plots replicated 3 times, so 15 plots. In the greenhouse, the same, 5 plots replicated 3 times. I used 5 NPK rates, 0, which was the control, 100, 200, and 300, and 400 kilograms per hectare. The experimental design was randomized complete block design. The micronutrients I analyzed were those 5, but in the results I'll only give 3. And I used the method by Babalola and Akinwande. Vitamin C content was analyzed using the 2,6-dichlorophenol dye method. And those are pepino fruits in the field, and that one is the other figure, they are in the lab. On results and discussion, this is the copper content in the pepino fruits. And as you can see in the field, the copper content was increasing, reached a peak at 300 kilograms, then decreased as the fertilizer rate increased to 400. The same in the greenhouse. The copper content was increasing from the control up to 200, but then after 200, the content decreased. So in trial 1, greenhouse grown fruits applied with 200 kilograms, and those up in the field supplied with 300 kilograms of NPK had the highest copper content. And in trial 2, the same trend was repeated. And according to Zanaki and During, they suggested that application of NPK may lead to increased copper content because the nitrogen in the fertilizer will increase the mobility of copper, hence increase in plant uptake. Sorry. How do I go back? Yeah, so manganese content, the same trend as in copper was repeated. In the field, application of 300 gave the highest content, and in the greenhouse, application of 200 kilograms gave the highest manganese content. The same as if the fertilizer use was NPK and the nitrogen in the NPK increased the mobility of manganese. Although the manganese content in the study in the fruits was low compared to other studies, and because the soil, mainly because the soil in the study was acidic, and as acidity increases, the manganese content also decreases. Then iron, which is a major micronutrient, in the field, application of 300 kilograms increased at the highest iron content, and in the greenhouse, application of 200 kilograms per hectare at the highest iron content. Koska et al. 2014 reported that nitrogen fertilization increases mobility of iron from the soil to the plants, and that might explain the reason for the high nitrogen content. Then in terms of vitamin C, the control had the lowest in both the greenhouse and the field, and application of 200 kilograms per hectare in the field and in the greenhouse produced the highest vitamin C content in both trials. And this can be explained by the fact that as the fertilizer rate increases, the foliage tends to increase because of the nitrogen, and you find that fruits which are not exposed to sunlight, they have low vitamin C content compared to those which are exposed to to light. In conclusion, application of 200 and 300 kilograms enhanced copper, manganese, and iron content of greenhouse and field-grown pepino melon fruits, respectively, while application of 200 in both environments enhanced vitamin C content of pepino melon fruits. I would like to acknowledge CSAM for funding my research, Egerton University for allowing me to do the research in their field and greenhouse, and my supervisors, Professor Ogweno and Dr. Gesimba, for their compliments and assistance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol, for that wonderful presentation. And we can see those very juicy fruits. And we hope that this has also enticed the audience to ask questions, to critically look at what has been presented. But because of the nature of time, I would want to request all the audience to post their queries into the chat box. So thank you very much. And we want to give her a very hearty clap. 1, 2, 3. 1. Thank you, Asante. So we want to go straight to Mase. If you are online from Pwani. Mase
Yes.
from Pwani.
Yes, I'm hearing you. Allow me to share my...
Green grams.
Yes.
Mase from Pwani on selected performance of green gram varieties on titanium mined soils in Kwale County.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
And they are very closely related with Florence also, who presented earlier. So you can take up your time now, Mase.
Thank you very much. I'm Masi Mutomba from Pwani University.
We can very well see your presentation. If you can put it into a full slideshow. Mase, if you are getting us clear and audible.
Yeah. Can I start? Okay, I'm Masi from Pwani University. My supervisors are Dr. Esther Muindi, Dr. Jackson Mulinge.
You can have a full screen slideshow. Bottom of the screen, please. At the right. Yeah. Okay, there you are. Continue now.
Okay, allow me to take you through a brief presentation on the performance of selected green grams varieties on titanium main soils in Kwale County. This is more of the same of what Florence has presented. The difference is the crop. So I will be more brief. The green grams crop are in the family of Fabaceae. They were first cultivated in India and Central Asia. In Kenya, we find them in most arid and semi-arid areas, that is Kitui, Tharaka Nithi, Makueni, Kilifi, and Kwale County. They do well in the following ecological areas, that is they require the altitude of maximum of 600 millimeters above the sea level. The temperatures of an optimum temperature of 28 to 30 degrees. It requires rainfall that well-distributed rainfall between 350 to 650 millimeters annually. Then it also does well in well-drained loam soils or sandy soils. It does well also in pH that is of neutral between 6 to 7.5. The green grams are the main source of, they are source of proteins, and they also have a certain content of vitamins that are important in human body. Thus, they can also be used as green manure, as cover crops, and hay for animal feed. Green grams, as the other crops, they also require the basic nutrients, that is both macronutrients and micronutrients. Then the soils with the limiting nutrients such as macro and micronutrients, they require the supplementation of both organic and inorganic fertilizers. Since the trial was done in the mining site, the importance, you realize the mining is important in our country as a source of economic income generation. It is also a source of job creation, a source of industrial raw materials. And with mining, it has also a negative effect on landscapes. It leads to loss of vegetation. It also leads to the soil degradation. Base Titanium is a mining company in Kwale County, and it normally uses the endohydraulic method as a mineral separation plant. And this method, the good thing with this method is that it does not leave chemicals in the soil, and hence this makes this soil suitable for agricultural purpose. And some of the minerals that are mined in base titanium include ilmenite, rutile, and zircon. The main challenge with the base titanium soils is that they are artificially reconstructed. That is, after the mining, they are normally reconstructed by overlaying of sand on the bedrock, then followed by compacted layers of sand and clay mixture. So as a result of this compaction, you realize that the top soil layer is very thin. And the other main challenge with these soils is that they are very poor in terms of physical, chemical, and biological properties. And this can lead to, they also have low nutrients. They have poor water holding capacity. The root penetration in these soils is poor. The soil structure is poorly aerated, and it is also prone to wind and water erosion. These soils again is that they are able, since the method used in the base titanium does not contaminate the soil with the toxic chemicals, we realize that they can be returned back, or they can be converted back to agricultural land, since, as I've said that since the method used in this company does not contaminate the soil. So to make these mined soils more productive, we realize that the use of an adoption of integrated soil fertility management approaches, that is use of such as application of organic and inorganic fertilizers, and other agronomic practices such as use of the cover crops like green grams, can maybe improve this soil and hence leading to more production in crops, and this will help us to solve the problem of food security in Kwale County. The main objective is that this study aimed at investigating the potential of these titanium mined soils to support the green gram production, and also to see the effect of integrating both the organic and inorganic fertilizers on growth and yield of this crop. The methodology, sorry. The experiment was carried out at the base Titania field in the South Dune in Kwale County. The experiment was laid out in a randomized complete block with a split plot arrangement, and it was replicated 3 times. The main plots and the varieties, that was KS20 and N26. And then the subplots and the amendments, and there were 4 amendments, that is the manure. There was the subplots with fertilizers and others with fertilizer plus manure, and then the others without the amendment, that is the control. The data collected included the initial and the final soil chemical properties, and this was done by taking the initial and the final soil sampling that was done at the depth of between 0 to 40 centimeters. Then the chemical analysis, the soil chemical analysis was done in the lab as described by the Okalembo. Then the data analysis was subjected to ANOVA using the GenStat statistical package. The treatment effects were tested for significance using the F-test at 5% level of significance, and the mean were ranked as
Please move us to the results very fast.
So the initial physiochemical properties, we realized that both the major nutrients such as phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen were low, and the organic matter was also low at the initial. Then the response of the green grams to the manure and the fertilizer, the normal growth patterns were observed in the 2 green varieties, that is N26 being slightly taller than KS20. The plants that were subjected to the initial nitrogen and phosphorus, that is the inorganic fertilizer alone, and in combination with manure, recorded higher heights compared to plants subjected to manure alone or without the amendment, that is the control. The graphs there show the plant height of the KS20 variety and the plant height of N26 variety. You can see there was a slight, the amendments of manure and fertilizer shows the higher height compared to the control. Then there was a manure and fertilizer interaction significantly increased grain yields in both varieties, that is KS20 and N26. In conclusion, you can say that the KS20 variety gave the highest yields on titanium-made soils compared to N26, and the inorganic fertilizer was the most effective in enhancing KS20 green grams growth and yield on the titanium-mined soils. The use of KS20 variety of green grams in these mined soils is recommended, and the use of inorganic fertilizers in the KS20 varieties is also recommended. The further research is also advocated to ascertain the long-term effect of the soil amendment on properties of titanium-mined soils and overall soil fertility. May I take this opportunity to thank my supervisors, the Base Titanium Company for funding the project, and the support that they have given me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mercy, for that also wonderful presentation. And because of the time factor, I'll just do the same, request all those who may be having some related query or recommendations or remarks, to post them in the chat box so that we could end there for this presentation. But just before we conclude this session, I would like to take you back to the morning session where we had the guest speaker and the challenges that she posed to us as the academia. The whole of today, we had presentation from postgraduates and early career researchers in terms of their research work. So she gave us a kind of a challenge. How do we bridge the gap between academia, research, and a practicability of it in the implementation? Does it end where we graduate with our different disciplines related to agriculture, or do we still take it further? You can also recall the keynote speaker posted to us the kind of challenge that we have had through this COVID season and the research that have been done and what their indicators are. So the big question would be, what future with all these kind of our research that has been undertaken in our different institutions, responding in future in reality of the situation that is there. One of our professors who is here also asked one of the students was dealing with issue of the briquettes, the utilization of his facility. So those are burning questions at the back of our minds that we should carry home, and we should be able to relate with what we have presented. So thank you very much for all those presenters of the day, the presentations. We are sorry to say that we have lost you, but because of the issues that are underlying the first day of any conference, we hope that tomorrow will be a different day. And we want to end there. My colleague, Dr. Ashimba, myself, Dr. Kingau from the Directorate of Research, Laikipia University. We want to wish you well, and we want to assure you that we shall do everything possible to be able to document all that has been presented, word of presentation. And we are also sorry that we were not able to receive the book of abstracts at the right time, but we are optimistic that we will have them by the end of the day, by tomorrow morning. So thank you very much, and I want to take this back to Dr. Florence. Let us all stand before she comes and do a bit of a stretching. When I say papaya, you react like papaya. When I say mango, you do it as mango. When you say banana, you do it as a banana. All these are good fruits. Mango, how does it look? You make it with your hands. Say loud. Papaya, how is it? Banana. How is it? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kingau and Dr. Achimba, for taking us through that great session. And as I sat on my chair and listen to the presentations. Sorry for that. And there were so many questions and, thought-provoking questions going through my mind. Does it mean that all these things are possible? People can explore many issues along the food value chain. So I believe that today we have gathered a lot. And of course, the reason why people engage in such platforms is to share, to comment, to enrich the presenter's work through comments, suggestions, and many other things. So I believe that even during the break times, you can still interact and share a lot. So I take this opportunity once again to thank all the presenters, thank Professor George Owuor for availing himself. He's a busy man, but you can see the way he's relaxed. I think we can do more presentations. He's ready to stay until 7. So thanks a lot, Prof, for sparing your time and join us. So tomorrow, the presentations will be made by the early career researchers. And I believe that we are all, those who have presented, aspire to be early career researchers. So let us purpose to be around so that we can also learn from the early career researchers. We will also have a discussion, group discussion. We'll also have a keynote speaker. So please let us converge here in the morning. 8:30, the program begins at 8:30. And it ends, of course, around the same time. So after this, we have a cup of coffee or tea. So kindly let us grab the coffee before we leave, or a cup of tea that was made for you. Thank you once again. And be blessed. So I call upon Rispa to close with a word of prayer.
Good evening and praise God. Let's bow down our heads and pray. Almighty God, King of Kings, we bow down before thy presence this evening. We thank you for the successful day that you have, O King of Kings, O God, and we won't take it for granted, O King of Glory. We thank you even because of the good weather, the meals that you have provided for us, O God, and even for the presenters, O King of Glory, we won't take it for granted, O King of Kings, O Lord. And even this evening, God, as we depart, O King of Kings, we pray that may you lead us on our ways, O Lord. And as even you continue the conference, Lord, we still need your presence and we still need your guidance until the end of it, O God. We pray that, my Father, at the end of it, O God, none of us shall be the same. But Lord, we pray that Lord may become the light of this world and become the reason for the transformation in agriculture. In the mighty name of Jesus, Lord, we pray and believe. Amen.
Thank you, Rispa. God bless you all. So we can depart and kindly get something right at the door.